We're talking NFC West today. This is the Dynasty Market Watch, where yesterday's price is not today's price. Presented by the Bulletproof family of podcasts. I've got Matt Davis joining me. I'm Todd Halverson. Last episode, we did AFC North. Today, we're talking NFC West. We're trying to do 3 divisions per week. So we're gonna hit the Cardinals, the Seahawks, the Rams, and the 49ers. Also on YouTube, if you go in there, Matt's got some nice slides set up, so you can check that out. We're getting creative all of a sudden. Look at us. But here we go. Let's play that Bad Joe.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
All right, Matt. So we're going to start with the Arizona Cardinals. This is a new fun one now that we've got Marvin Harrison Jr. in there. All of a sudden, Trey McBride. They added Trey Benson this offseason. And then Kyler Murray is going to get a full season. And we talked about Kyler Murray in the last episode when we were talking AFC North, when we were talking quarterbacks. I love me some Kyler Murray in the mid of a startup draft. I mean, him, Herbert, two of my favorite values in startups. And getting those guys in the mid-second, I think, is just a major.
I'm a little surprised Kyler isn't closer to that 1-2 turn yet. It almost felt like there's been some momentum that way. A lot of people have been targeting him this offseason that I've seen anyway. But don't you feel like that's closer to where his actual trade value is like that 1-2 turn, like that Richardson, Caleb, Love area? That's kind of what I've seen. I don't really see him as distinguishable from those.
Yeah, we're going to get to CMC here in a bit, but CMC is going ahead of him currently in ADP. I think a lot of times the way the quarterback market works, like even though ARSB is a half round ahead of him, they're going to have a hard time offering the Kyler manager, if they don't have any other quarterback options, ARSB for Kyler. So, yeah, I mean, I think he's probably kind of clumped together. And we talked about that in the last episode when we were talking about AFC North. It's like Joe Burrow, and then it's like a big tier that runs all the way through Kyler. And you've got 6 quarterbacks there. It's like Joe Burrow, Anthony Richardson, Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, Herbert, and then Kyler Murray. And I mean, give me the guy going at the end of the tier. Like, if any of these guys outscored the other, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, if we're talking about odds to score the most points this year, like, I might go Kyler. Is that? I mean, like, I might go Kyler.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, it's probably hard for us to overstate how much getting Marvin Harrison Jr. can help Kyler. And I mean, also, like everybody knows, he's now 2 years removed from that ACL injury. Mm-hmm. But I mean, if Marvin Harrison is like 80% of what people expect him to be, I mean, that's what this offense was missing last year. I mean, they had Trey McBride breaking out, but outside of that, they were using, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, guys I don't even know. So, yeah, I think we're going to get a pretty consolidated target group with this offense with Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride, and then whatever's left kind of for everyone else.
Yeah. And so you mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. We talked about a trade last time. You brought up a trade of Jamar Chase for Marvin Harrison Jr. first. I took the Marvin Harrison Jr. side. So I'm going to take it another step and ask you, Marvin Harrison Jr. for Waddle in a first.
Oh yeah, give me Waddle in the first, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's you're getting that's a tougher one for me. Because I'm constantly trying to get into that top tier of receivers, which is like 8 guys roughly. And it's of course, the top 4 that ends with ARSB. And you got like Marvin Harrison Jr., Puka, Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown. And then after that, things get murkier for me. But there is a cluster of guys like Ayuk, Waddle, Nico that I really like. But getting that first is pretty nice. I think if it was like a playoff first, I'd probably lean Marvin Harrison Jr. If I felt like, all right, this is the pick that might miss the playoffs, then maybe I go the Waddle side. But I thought it was an interesting thought because of the one that you brought up the other day, where it was Jamar Chase for Marvin Harrison Jr. in the first. All right, so now Jamar Chase for Waddle and 2 firsts.
I would take take Waddle in the 2 first there.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a differing philosophy that we have. Like, obviously, the whole point of playing fantasy is you want to have the best players. So I understand why the elite of the elite wide receivers and quarterbacks have the value that they have. But especially as someone who likes to trade a lot and someone who's kind of seen the ups and downs of value fluctuations over the years, like, I just like grabbing those extra firsts. I mean, you made the point on yesterday's podcast about you can turn that first into like another top 40 asset pretty easily.
Yeah.
And
we just saw Roma Dunze go in the 106, 107 in rookie drafts, and here he is as like wide receiver 13 in Dynasty. So yeah, I think getting those first is just pretty massive. All right, so the rest of this, Michael Wilson. I mean, if you're taking darts in in the wide receiver 60 to 80 range, he's fine. I don't really see much of the upside with him, but he's fine as a guy to stash.
So I'm like it's funny. You and Brian always dismiss this as like stupid bullshit, and of course you guys are correct. But like, I love like trying to like kind of look at stuff off the field for some of these players and like see like, just we kind of know all the data and all the facts by now and all the numbers on the field. So I like kind of getting a glimpse of like what a player's like off the field in terms of maximizing whatever potential that they do have. And Michael Wilson, like, one thing that Kyler has said about him all offseason is that, he's like one of those first in, last out type guys. He's like a really smart guy. He's already kind of taken steps in OTAs about like mentoring other, like Marvin Harrison Jr., which is kind of a joke. I don't know that Marvin Harrison needs mentoring from Michael Wilson.
He's like 5 years older than him, though.
Yeah. So like, but like, that's the kind of thing I like to hear, especially when the opportunity looks like this. Like, if we're looking at the screen right now, there's a reason there's no other wide receivers listed. Like they don't have anybody, and maybe someone emerges, whatever. But Michael Wilson's dirt fucking cheap right now, and there's a path to him getting 700 or 800 yards this year, and then now he's worth a second, and whatever you can. So like, I kind of like him for that, but like, I agree with you. He doesn't have much of a ceiling. I like his cost though. Like, if you're going to sell me Michael Wilson at wide receiver 73 prices, I'm probably buying. What's that, a 3rd round pick? I'd probably rather have him than like a mid to late 3rd.
Yeah, he's the type of guy that if I have him on my team, inevitably I get into a trade discussion, and somebody's like, "I need Michael Wilson too," and I'm like, "Whatever, you can."
Yeah, you can have him. Like, that's not going to impair our deal.
All right. So the Cardinals also got James Conner, Trey Benson. In rookie drafts, I loved getting Benson in like that 204, 205 range.
Yeah.
And I think he's a great player to have that you plan to do a 1-year rebuild. I don't think anybody's really trying to have many running backs when you're rebuilding, but he's the type of guy that's not going to score many points for you. And there's a good chance that next year he's the RB1, maybe like he's in a 60-40 split with somebody. I don't see him as being like a total workhorse at any point, but I see him as a guy that could be like an Aaron Jones, where they're efficient because he's really athletic. He can make plays and score touchdowns in this, which we hope to be an explosive offense at some point. So I really like him in a 1-year rebuild. Like, if you're tanking right now and you're like, I don't want any running backs, I would make an exception for Trey Benson.
Yeah, and the reason I'm kind of bullish on him, and I'm pretty overweight on Benson, and I like James Conner at his price too a lot, is by a lot of different rushing efficiency metrics, the Cardinals were the best in the entire NFL last year. Like, in terms of like rushing DVOA, rushing yards over expectation, that kind of thing.
Is James Conner just good?
Yeah. So Ian Hartitz had a tweet about James Conner where he's like top 6. He was like top 6 in like all the peripherals last year, like yards after contact, rushing yards over expectation, a bunch of other things. I think James Conner is one of those guys that's just continually underrated, and like, yeah, eventually he's going to fall off. But he's also someone that, like, he's 29 years old. Historically, these guys have already fallen off by now, and he hasn't. So kind of like you were mentioning with Derrick Henry, like, can he give you 2 more years of maybe not RB1, but like 2 more years of like top 20 production? Probably.
Yeah, I mean,
but if he falls off by week 4, it shouldn't surprise anybody, really. So
yeah, in that RB range, he's going after Tony Pollard, after Jalen Warren, after Aaron Jones. Him and Aaron Jones are basically the same to me. I think I might I'd prefer James Conner over Pollard for sure.
yeah.
I'd prefer him over Warren probably. Probably, I don't know. They're probably about the same. But like if I was a contender, maybe I'd take Conner. And then ahead of that is Tyjae Spears. And Tyjae Spears feels very much like Trey Benson a year ago, where you get Spears, you're thinking, okay, like maybe he can be the 60-40 split. Obviously, it hasn't worked out for Spears to this point, but I still see some upside for Spears to be, he's really pretty efficient last year with a crappy Titans offense. So I see a similar outlook for Benson as Tyjae Spears. So, maybe he loses, like where he's being ranked at right now for Trey Benson, RB17. That feels a little bit steep.
It does. That was my immediate reaction too, and we both like Benson a lot.
Yeah, you've got him as RB18, so like RB17, RB18. That feels a little bit steep to me. But if I could pivot from receiver in that range, like obviously I would have preferred Trey Benson over Keon Coleman in rookie drafts. Let's say you're a team that's kind of ready to rebuild. You didn't rebuild your team this offseason, and you kind of waited until the last minute, and you've still got like Mike Evans on your team. I wouldn't mind just swapping Mike Evans for Trey Benson if you're headed into a rebuild, maybe like a 1-year retool. It's pretty unconventional to go into a rebuild with running backs, but like I said, I think that Trey Benson is ready to be a contributor next year, and he's not going to give you a ton of points for the 2024 season.
Yeah, and we saw with Spears, they don't need to. The running backs don't need to do a lot their rookie year to gain value. Like before the Pollard signing, Spears was already flirting with that late first value.
Yeah, he was like between like RB 13 and 15 there for a long time. So the other guy on this team is Trey McBride.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are you doing with Trey McBride?
I love a Trey McBride. I love pivoting off of those non-elite receivers, guys like Nico, guys like Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, guys in that range, trying to pivot off of them into McBride. I've done that twice.
That trade we were just talking about with you and Zoltan, where you essentially got McBride and gave up Ayuk. And
yeah. So I traded Ayuk for McBride. Another time this offseason, I traded for McBride. I traded DK and Zamir White for McBride. So like any of those receivers that are in that glob range of like wide receiver 16 to 25, if I could add like a second value to them to get McBride, or if I can pivot straight 1-for-1, a Nico and Ayuk or Romadunze, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, maybe I have to add a little bit. Pittman, maybe I have to add a little bit. But going to McBride, pivoting off the receiver, getting into an elite tight end, I love that.
So I think I kind of agree with you. So to sum up your stance with Trey McBride is like, if you have him, you're holding him. If you are kind of trying to buy him with wide receivers going around that same ADP, and you're not really trying to tier down from him to like Andrews and Hawkinson plus draft compensation or draft picks or something.
No, yeah, I wouldn't want to move off going down. Yeah, I would agree. Maybe like Bowers, I'd be okay going Bowers or Kincaid. Both of those I would need a plus. But like McBride and Kincaid go basically back to back in ADP.
Yeah, that's what I was
2-3. And that's kind of, I see them in a different tier. Like I see Laporta and McBride tier 1, and then like tier 2 being like Kincaid, Bowers. I'm kind of fine including Pitts and Andrews in that group. Hawkinson will eventually get back there, but you're just missing like half of this season, which is a little bit frustrating. But from a value standpoint, if you're a tanker, Hawkinson's great to have. He's going to recruit probably a round and a half, 2 rounds of value in 12 months.
So like Hawkinson in like a mid 25 first for McBride.
Oh yeah, so I'm going to take the Hawkinson in first side. So I guess the counter then maybe would be Hawkinson and a first or McBride a second. I'd probably still go Hawkinson and the first there.
Okay. Or if it's like a juggernaut, or if it's like a juggernaut team that, like, especially because you're giving them McBride, you think they have a chance to get a bye week.
Yeah, that one would be a little bit more dependent. Maybe I have just a ton of value build up, and I've got Hawkinson. I'm a great team, but like I'm going to miss Hawkinson for the first part of the year. I've got a lot of picks stashed. I'm willing to burn one and move up to McBride. Then yeah, that's a little bit different. But I'm still pretty bullish on Hawkinson. But he's quite a bit older than McBride, and I'm very bullish on McBride as well.
Yeah, I think we see them pretty much the same. We can move on here to the Seattle Seahawks. We'll start with the quarterbacks here, and you were kind of a Howell guy last year.
Yeah.
For the last 2 years, I've been a Geno guy. My initial inclination when making these slides was to just leave Howell off. And then I was like, well, I can't really do that. If we're going to do Russ and Fields, Geno and Howell are about the same like rank as Russ and Fields, which kind of surprises me. Like, because I mean, there's 5 rounds of ADP gap there, but like QB 29 to QB 35 is not a big gap. Geno's one of my favorite veteran buys. I think he's going to be in for a big year. You think there's any chance Howell just takes his job, not from injury, but
I have a hard time seeing it just takes his job because they're going to be a pretty competitive team. And so they would take them like basically just falling apart and being like 3-7. And then they say, okay, let's just see what.
I think they're going to do. Yeah.
But I love these QBs at this range, like ADP in the 16th round, because they can just accrue value so much. I mean, like everybody's like, oh, you should get, like in real estate, everybody's like, oh, you need to own real estate. And you have like the guy that owns like this like dumpy house in like a shitty part of town, and then all of a sudden people start like building around the house, and like now there's a grocery store around the corner, and then like all of a sudden like the property value just like soars. That's Sam Howell, and that could be him, and that could be Justin Fields, that could be these quarterbacks that are QB2s. All they need is like something else to happen. It has nothing to do with them, and then all of a sudden they're worth a second, and then all of a sudden like, oh, now they like have a good game, and now they're worth like a late first. And like that happened for Sam Howell last year. And I think like it happened for Geno Smith at one point. Like all of a sudden we just entered Geno Smith onto the Seattle starting lineup. And all of a sudden like, whoa, like this guy, he's like worth like people were drafting him like in round 5-6 of startups at one point a couple years ago. So like, it can happen with these guys, and there's not many receivers, not many running backs, tight ends going in round 16 of a startup that can accrue value the way a quarterback can. So no, I'm not like out going and trading seconds for Sam Howell, but I'm not on the places that I have Sam Howell. I'm not just giving him away because the upside is there. Like it could happen.
Just because I think this
is necessarily he'll get back to first round value, but I think he can very easily get back to like 2 2s or something crazy. Like it just happens.
This is like a meaningless question, but just because we just did the Cardinals, if you're on the clock in a startup, are you taking Michael Wilson or Sam Howell?
Probably, I mean, Sam Howell. Like I just
because of what you just said, there's an easier path to.
And also with it's very much similar to like backup running backs. Like there's a world where Geno's just out for 3 weeks and you can use Sam Howell. It's like Jake Browning last year with the Bengals. Like Jake Browning's never going to be a starter in the NFL, but he got to play last year and was on a lot of teams in the playoffs. So like Sam Howell can just be a guy that he's always a career QB2, and he keeps getting opportunities because the guy he's playing with keeps going down.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I mean, Howell showed that he can play a little bit at the NFL level. Like two different guys that I really like to follow is Matt Harmon, who everybody knows from Reception Perception, and Robert Mays, who runs the Athletic Football Podcast. Both of them at different times, they break down film, and both of them at different times have said this offseason that Eric Bieniemy's offense in Washington was among the stupidest offenses that they have seen in the last few years. So Howell wasn't really done any favors just because he dropped back a ton last year. But I mean, that's probably enough on Sam Howell. All right, so the running backs, Ken Walker, RB11, 509 ADP. You think that's about right for him?
Whenever, all right, so rookie drafts when he was coming out, I got a lot of Ken Walker, and then he jumped up to like running back, like top 3 running back, and I traded all of them. So I have no Ken Walker anymore. I have no shares at all. But he's going around like Pacheco, Josh Jacobs, Rashad White's RB13, Jonathan Brooks is RB14. I'd probably prefer him over everybody but Brooks. I don't know. He and Pacheco are kind of close. I don't know. Maybe I'd prefer Pacheco. But they're all in a cluster together. I think he's just properly valued, and like you're basically pivoting by taking one of those guys in a startup or in a trade. You're basically saying, okay, Ken Walker over George Pickens or Ken Walker over T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, those types of receivers.
Yeah.
And I don't really see any issue with that. Like if if you can stock your team with receivers up like Garrett Wilson, like a Chris Olave, AJ Brown, and then like you don't have to deal with the glob of receivers in this range, I don't mind that as a pivot going from like T to Ken Walker. But I'm not like a Ken Walker guy, and I don't really. I've got more Pacheco. I've got like one Brooks.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs is the one to me that kind of sticks out as a sore thumb in this group. Like he's definitely the end of that group. Like this is RB 10 through 15. If you also include James Cook, I would definitely have Josh Jacobs at the end.
See, I've never been like a big Ken Walker guy, but the reason I kind of like his ADP, and I'm basically with you, I think it's fair. I don't think he's like a screaming buy or sell at that price. I think Zach Charbonnet is a pretty big sell. I don't even know if like he's going in the 12th round, so it's not like he's like crazy valued, but I think he's just bad. I don't think he was good at all last year. And like, for example, like if we go by ADP, I would just rather have Ray Davis on Buffalo than Zach Charbonnet. And he goes 4 rounds.
This is a great segue because here we go. So I have I have Ray Davis and Elijah Mitchell in a league where the Zach Charbonnet owner came to me and offered me Charbonnet for Mitchell and Davis, and I just accepted it. So you would rather have Ray Davis, and I just kicked him Elijah Mitchell. So the reason he offered it to me was because he had CMC. So basically wanted to have the Elijah Mitchell as the handcuff for CMC.
Yeah.
And I included Ray Davis in the deal also. I don't really.
So you like Charbonnet kind of like for his value.
Not really. I mean, that's the only time I've ever owned a share of Charbonnet. And I think basically I just don't jump on the bandwagon of these like new RB2s and 3s that teams acquire because they eventually turn into RB4s. So like the guys like Ray Davis, Bucky Irving, Tyrone Tracy, Audric Estime, all these guys that everybody gets so excited about, I just kind of end up not really caring about any of them. And I'll end up like, I'll land on a share here and there just because of the way rookie drafts play out. And then inevitably one of those guys becomes like the next Zamir White that jumps into the top 25 and I miss out a lot. But there's also times where like I end up adding Zamir White off of the waiver wire. Like I added him off the waiver wire in like 1 or 2 leagues. And I play in like leagues where it's mostly like greater than 30 players on a roster. So it's not like they're like these like top like 20-man rosters or anything like. So I just don't really jump in on those guys, and I'll try to every time I see a running back on the wire, that's what I add. I just don't really get into the Ray Davises of the world, really. And I know that that's kind of against the grain because everybody's like, "Ooh, Rasheen Ali, like, I'm all in. He's my guy this year," and I'm just like, if I end up with him, that's fine, but I'm not out like targeting those guys.
Yeah, makes sense. I have an Elijah Mitchell take I'll save for when we do the 49ers.
Okay.
We can revisit that. So here's something I was going to ask you because I think we're going to have the same answer here. Obviously, we're going to try and play the market and get whatever plus we think the market is telling us we should get. If you had to choose one guy straight up right now, would you rather have JSN or DK Metcalf?
Same tier, which that tier's big for me, but I think I'd rather have JSN.
Yeah, me too. I'd rather have him straight up.
I see a world where JSN hops into the Waddle, Ayuk,
Nico Collins,
Nico tier. Maybe there's a crazy world. It's very unlikely that he hops into like the Garrett Wilson grouping, but I see that. Like, if you were like, "Hey, who has a better chance of hopping into that tier, JSN or DK?" I'm going to take JSN. Like, I see 0% chance for DK to get into that group. So yeah, JSN. Now for this season, now the kicker comes like, what do I see this season?
For redraft? I'd rather have DK Metcalf.
Yeah, but what's the gap? And I don't think the gap is like so substantial. And like, let's just say that JSN is pretty much unusable this year, which basically if he's unusable, then his value plummets. So that's probably not a great example. Let's say that he's like 2 or 3 points less per game than DK. It's not like DK's points per game is so much that I can't replace it. Like, I can go down and get like Chris Godwin and just replace DK Metcalf.
Yeah, like Amari Cooper, like we talked about yesterday. Yeah.
I mean, I think Amari Cooper will probably outproduce DK.
Yeah,
so, yeah. So it's just, I mean, like, all right, here's one, like DeAndre Hopkins, like that's getting a lot further down. DK Hopkins points per game versus DK, maybe like a point or two difference. Like, what's the line there on a points per game difference between those two? Probably not a huge amount. So yeah, give me JSN because the upside value is just there. But they're same tier for me.
The thing that has me excited, especially like that's kind of reigniting my excitement for Geno Smith, especially at his current cost, with this receiving core, is I really like Ryan Grubb coming in from that Washington offense in college last year, where like, and they've already kind of talked about it with Geno and Mike McDonald and some of the other guys. Like they're planning on fucking slinging this ball. Like he wants to throw it downfield. One of the things that was like just enraging last year about JSN was that he kept getting like these fucking bubble screens and like behind the line of scrimmage targets. And when you looked at him at Ohio State, he excelled in like the intermediate and deep route areas. He's a fantastic route runner. And he wasn't like, and there's a reason that JSN had nothing good to say about Shane Waldron, like when they interviewed him and asked him about it. And he's just like, man, he's a nice guy. Good luck to the Bears. Like,
I think in your slide that you have here for the Seattle Seahawks, it needs to say offseason losses, Shane Waldron leaving, like bye-bye.
Yeah, and you know what? And
the Bears were excited to get him too, like, which didn't really make much sense to me. Maybe he's like good real life OC. He just doesn't seem like, I don't know. I'm not really buying it, to be honest.
Yeah, and like and Lockett, I mean, wide receiver 71, that guy's probably going to give you 12 points a game again. Like, maybe he falls off, but like people have been saying that for 3 years now. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
he's probably
Jalen McMillan. We mentioned Michael Wilson. He's going in the same range. Gabe Davis.
Yeah, give me Lockett overall.
If you're just in a pinch and you need a wide receiver to start, I don't mind, tossing like J.K. Dobbins or something at Tyler Lockett. They're in the same, like Chig Okonkwo. They're going in the same round. And then we have Noah Fant. I think he's really interesting here because Shane Waldron's leaving. Shane Waldron seems to love like the 2 or 3 tight ends, just kind of running them all out there, letting them split snaps. I think he's really interesting as tight end 26. He's tight end 26 both on KTC and in ADP. He's like 3 years younger than like Goddard. He's all right. So Njoku was 26 when he had kind of his coming out party.
Yeah.
Fant's 26 coming in right now. So like it's not unheard of for a 26-year-old tight end to kind of figure things out. And let's not forget, like when he first came in, like he did some nice things his first couple of years. So if you're in a trade and you can get like Noah Fant thrown into it, I think that one's an interesting one to me.
Yeah, so I kind of agree with you. I like him for his cost. He's a great flyer if you can get him thrown into a trade. I just wouldn't expect this to be the year that we get the Noah Fant year. Like eventually he's going to be just like a 900-yard year. I think he needs two things to go right for him. Like if Tyler Lockett like tears his ACL in August, I don't even think that's enough for Fant to be a weekly starter. I think he also needs JSN to be bad, or JSN or DK.
Yeah, I don't know that it's the receiver thing. I think it's just that he needs to like get nearly 100% of the tight end snaps and the tight end routes. I don't think it really has much to do with the other players. Like he's not going to take targets over those guys. It's the fact that he just needs to be in on that, 3rd and goal from the 5, and they run the play action boot, and he's like the guy standing wide open. Like he needs to get those instead of like Colby Parkinson last year, who's now on the Rams. So he just needs to be getting those types of plays. All right, so if I've got a team that I'm trying to make it like I don't have enough assets to invest in a tight end 2, maybe my tight end 1 is like a Trey McBride, and I'm like I don't have enough funds to be like let me make Cole Kmet or Njoku or Ingram my tight end 2. Like I'm kind of I'm not built that way. I don't mind making Noah Fant my tight end 2 at the start of the season and just see what happens.
Yeah,
and then if like McBride goes down, Fant sucks, then I got to trade for somebody.
Because he's basically the cheapest option unless you want to ride the Taysom Hill ride again. Fant's about the cheapest option. I'd feel okay, desperate plugging into that spot during a bye week injury, whatever.
You got guys like Cade Otton that you could maybe do in the lean tight end 2 build. You mentioned Taysom Hill, maybe Hunter Henry. Just got somebody that you feel like, okay, I might be able to get 6 points out of. Noah Fant's the one that I wouldn't mind doing because I think that there is a world where he could be back up in like a year or two and like a top 15 tight end. I'm not saying that's going to happen. I just think that there is a world where that does happen, unlike the rest of those guys I just mentioned.
So I finally scrolled down enough to find one, actually. Jonnu Smith, tight end 40. Like I kind of like Jonnu this year.
That's not a bad one.
But
I've long liked Juwan Johnson, and then he got hurt this offseason.
Yeah,
so I've got Juwan Johnson on several teams where I've got a similar build. It's like my tight end 2 on I've just kind of leaned. I've got a really good tight end 1. I'm thinking of one team right now where I have McBride, and then Juwan Johnson's my tight end 2. So that's the type of thing that I might try to do. And then, all right, if McBride goes down, unless Fant's like playing really well, then I'm probably going and trying to trade for an Njoku or something.
Yep, makes sense.
All right, let's get
to the Los Angeles Rams. Where do you want to start here? Stafford?
Yeah, let's just start with Stafford. Just kind of looking at the quarterbacks that are in that range. My initial reaction when I thought about Stafford was like, oh, like for sure I'm going to look and see that he's overvalued. I mean, he's right there with like Aaron Rodgers. I think that's pretty reasonable. I'd probably rather have Rodgers though. I see them both as being like 2 more years basically left.
Yeah.
And so from a points per game, it's probably gonna be the same. So I'd probably prefer Rodgers. So I'd say Stafford's maybe a little bit overrated, but not as overrated as I was expecting him to be at QB 26. Like Michael Penix is QB 27. From a value standpoint, I'd much rather have Penix. So I don't know. Like if I'm gonna have Stafford, I'd probably rather just spend less. Like if I'm like, okay, I need to get a QB 2. Who am I going to buy? It does make me feel a lot more comfortable buying him than Geno or Daniel Jones because I feel very confident that Matthew Stafford's going to have the job for the whole season. Unlike the other 2 guys, like I think there's a world they just like are so bad that they lose the job.
One thing I like my Stafford take, and I kind of agree with you. There's different QB, like Penix, I kind of like more than some of the other QBs in this range, but I would prefer Stafford to Kirk Cousins, and Cousins goes like a round earlier than him, and I have noticed that Stafford is a bit easier to trade for than Kirk Cousins, and I, I I'm not saying that Achilles is going to like really mess with Cousins' career, but we just don't know. Stafford has had some of his injuries in the past, but he's coming off a completely healthy year where he was playing fucking lights out football that didn't really translate to like an upper echelon fantasy season, but he played outstanding last year overall. And he's tied to Sean McVay, where Kirk Cousins has like off-brand Sean McVay over there. Like it's not the real deal. He's got who we all consider like a certified stud in Puka now. So I really like Stafford at his ADP. Like he would be the guy even over Geno that I would be targeting if I was looking for that veteran QB2.
I think you make a good point that Kirk Cousins is overrated or overvalued.
Yeah, I think and I didn't even mention them drafting his successor 8th overall. Like the Rams didn't do that. They brought in Jimmy Garoppolo. I can't even think of a less threatening backup quarterback to have. So
yeah, I think all these guys like Cousins, Stafford, Rodgers, and then maybe even Geno, and then if you want to stretch it, maybe Carr. These guys are all playing in like a 2-year window.
Yeah.
And what's the points per game difference going to be between like Rodgers and Cousins? Like if you told me Rodgers outproduced him, like I wouldn't be surprised at all. So why am I spending a round and a half, almost 2 rounds gap on Cousins to Rodgers? A round and a half Cousins to Stafford. Yeah, I think the point here to me is that Cousins is way overvalued. Stafford, Rodgers probably properly valued. But if I'm looking for a QB2, yeah, Stafford's a pretty viable option.
Yep, agreed. So Kyron, a little overvalued, maybe. It's hard to say, man.
I think he was for a long time because he was like up in like the RB6 range in startups like earlier this offseason. But then since the Corum draft pick, he's down to RB9. I kind of value him in the range of like Pacheco, Ken Walker, Jonathan Brooks that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
But he's drafted well ahead of those guys.
Yeah, man, Kyron's a tough one for me. Like he's one of those like he is a textbook example, right, of like high risk, high reward, where like not only was he RB2 in points per game last year, but he was closer to CMC. He was closer to RB1 than he was RB3 last year. Now that came with like a ton of volume, etc. But like McVay likes to do that. McVay likes to give one running back the majority of the carries historically. And McVay talks about Kyron Williams like he fucking loves the guy, man. Like you can tell that he just trusts Kyron Williams to do what he's supposed to do his fucking job in the offense. And so that's where I lean like that he's properly valued, but it is pretty scary because he's a day 3 running back, has no draft capital, no insulated value. He doesn't even have that popping athleticism that we kind of like to see where he can run off like a 70-yard touchdown. He's not going to do that. He needs 20 touches a game to kind of maintain his value. So that's asking a lot, especially Jacob and other draft people have said that Blake Corum is basically a carbon copy of Kyron Williams. So a lot of people are projecting it's going to be like Kyron gets 2 series and then Blake Corum gets 1 series and then kind of go from there.
That's kind of how I see it unfolding later in the year. I think early in the year, it's probably going to be like 3-1. But ultimately, I think it ends up being like 2-1. Then you'll have like a game where Kyron gets hurt and then he comes back and then it's like a even split. And then I think it's just going to end up being just really uncomfortable position to be in with Kyron Williams. And then all of a sudden, like maybe you don't maybe you got a juggernaut roster and then you don't play him 1 week and then he comes back and he gets like 90% of the snaps and you're just kind of like what's going on here? But and whereas like with Pacheco, I don't see that happening. Like I see him just getting basically all the snaps. But like Ken Walker and him feel very similar. So that's kind of, but Kyron's in a much better situation. I just wouldn't touch him in a startup if I've got a high value team and Kyron's the guy that's available in the trade market and I can send away like a Jaden Reed and a second for Kyron or something, then I'd be probably okay with that. If I'm like, all right, I'm ready to shove the chips. I'm going to get the buy. Let me send one of these receivers away and maybe a pick, and like I'm pushing for a buy this year. That'd be the way that I'd probably acquire Kyron Williams, unless I'm not like sending a first round pick for him. I'm not trading away like a like Nico and Devontae Smith go on either side of him in a startup. Like I'm not trading either of those guys for him. I'm not trading away like a Mark Andrews or TJ Hawkinson for him. Like it would have to be like a guy that I view as like wide receiver 30 and then like a pick.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I have one share in my 22 leagues, and like that's enough. I have a tiny bit of exposure if he goes off, and I'm pretty limited if he gets hurt or anything else happens. So with that said, Corum is just properly valued. Like he's a very high value handcuff, obviously.
Yeah, like paying up for him. Just, I mean, I don't feel great about that. I don't have any shares, so maybe I just don't. Maybe I don't see it with him.
I've won, but yeah.
Like with Tyjae Spears, you saw, all right, next year, Derrick Henry's probably gone. There was talk of Derrick Henry getting traded last year. So like you could see how it turns into the Tyjae Spears job. I just don't see how it becomes the Blake Corum job until maybe 2026.
I mean, Corum would just have to be flat out better.
And even if he is, then it's probably just like a 60% Corum, 40% Kyron type of deal.
Yeah. I mean, Corum would still return nice value with that split. But yeah, that's like
he would. So yeah, he's probably like a round 7
ceiling outcome though.
Yeah. So he becomes like a round 7 type guy instead of a round 10. They're probably like both round 7 type guys then. So I think Corum's you're basically getting him with the hopes that maybe Kyron gets hurt. Like I just don't see him being very useful.
At his current value, it's kind of like you were saying with Benson. Like if I'm a rebuilding team, I like holding on to Corum. If I'm contending now, I would just rather have James Conner who goes after him. I'd rather have Aaron Jones. I'd rather throw a third, like Corum in a third for David Montgomery or Najee or something. And that way I'm getting my production this year. So because I really think there's a good chance that Blake Corum is Tank Bigsby this year.
I was just getting ready when you were stopped talking. I was just getting ready to say what I mean. Like we sat here last year with ETN having coming off like a really good season, and then we were like all hype about Tank Bigsby as this like RB2 for that team, and that could be Blake Corum. So
yeah, I was guilty of that. I love Tank Bigsby as a prospect, but yeah, I mean, there's a scenario where Blake
Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, there's a scenario where Blake Corum just barely touches the ball, and Kyron is a fucking flat out stud again this year. But I don't have much to say about their receivers just because they have two relevant ones. I think both of them are about perfectly valued, and I kind of am good buying both of them at that cost if I can afford it with Puka, basically.
Puka or Garrett Wilson for you?
Man, that is so tough. I think I would, man. I have more Garrett Wilson, but I think I would lean Puka.
I go Garrett Wilson. I really do see the world where Garrett Wilson is maybe not right there with Jefferson, Lamb, and Chase next year, but he's like right there with ARSB, where like we want to put him in the group, but we're not quite ready to do it. I think he's going to have a top 5 wide receiver season this year, and we're just kind of talking about him as a.
I agree with that on Garrett Wilson, and I also think that's most likely going to happen with Puka this year. I think there's just a little bit of slight nervousness baked into his wide receiver 6 cost. He puts up 1,400 yards again. Yeah, I think you're going to see him like right there with Amon-Ra, basically. And I think that's decent chance of happening. I don't know what you'd say percentage wise, but I think Puka's going to have a fucking great year again. I think he's perfect in this offense. Perfect with Sean McVay, who knows how to use him. Obviously, Matt Stafford. Like as long as Matt Stafford stays healthy, I think Puka's going to absolutely smash. But it's a toss up to me. I mean, like if you're offering me any kind of plus for Garrett Wilson or Puka on either side, I'll take it.
What about Marvin Harrison Jr.?
See, I'm a little lower on Marvin Harrison Jr. than the market. Like I would have him at the end of this tier, kind of. Like I have him ranked really high, but I would rather have Puka and Garrett Wilson than Marvin Harrison. And with Puka versus Marvin, it's just kind of like, and I know this is simplistic thinking, and I know it's a little bit lazy. We want Marvin Harrison to do what Puka just already did. Like, I don't know what more we could have asked for Puka. Like, I guess we just want to see him do it again, right? But it was such a historic rookie year that I think he overcame all draft capital concerns, and like I think he's just a flat out fucking stud, and he should be treated like that. And he mostly is. He's a mid-second round startup pick. So I just would take the guy that I've already seen do it at the NFL level, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've got several Marvin Harrison Jr. and I would prefer him to Puka, but basically in all the leagues where I have Marvin Harrison Jr., people are constantly knocking on the door trying to get him. Yeah. So maybe the person that has Puka would prefer him, and maybe like a 2-3 swap, or maybe just getting a second on top is possible. But it would probably have to be a 2-3 swap, I imagine, because people that also have Puka are really high on him too. So yeah, that one's probably Marvin Harrison Jr. for me, but I still am very high on Puka. I think he's pretty awesome. And he's another reason why I love taking those receivers. I mean, even in the first and second round of a startup. So I think that's just getting those guys, those elite guys, is just huge.
So, you think Kupp is kind of washed, or are you trying to like turn him into like Amari Cooper or Christian Kirk, or are you just kind of rolling with him if you have him?
So Kupp, Adams, Diggs, and Tyreek have been kind of clumped together for like the last 3 or 4 years. Tyreek is obviously still a top 12 receiver. You need to be selling him, by the way. And then Kupp, Diggs, and Adams are still kind of clumped together. My rank of those 3 would probably be pretty in line with consensus, which is Adams, Diggs, or Adams, Kupp, then Diggs. But I'm kind of bullish on Kupp right now. I think that he might just turn around and have another top 12 wide receiver season.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if he outproduced Puka. Like in the sense that they both like go for like 1,300 and like 1,200 or something like that. Now, I'm not saying like vastly outproduce him, but I see a world where they're just neck and neck. They're basically, one guy's good one week, the other guy's the guy the next week. Kupp, maybe he ends up being more of the touchdown guy in the red zone for like one last hoorah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty bullish on Kupp, and if I'm a contender, he's really the type of guy that I'm trying to go after. Like, instead of saying like, oh, I need to go get Tyreek Hill for my contender, Kupp's the one that I would probably be looking to go after, because he still is in a great situation. Sounds like he was hurt for most of last year. And don't forget, when he first came back from his injury at the beginning of last year, he was awesome. And then he got hurt a couple games in. But that first game back, he looked like prime Kupp in that first game back. And then he just kind of nicked up the whole rest of the year. I think that you see like one last hoorah with Kupp. maybe somewhat similar to how we saw one last hurrah from Keenan Allen last year. I think that probably the days for him are numbered on having like a top 8 season. And so I think that we might get the last year for Cooper Kupp. I think he could be a guy that can help you get to a bye.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we've said this a couple times, but like the consolidated targets on this team is, I think, the main reason to be bullish on Kupp, coupled with the fact that once a guy gets lower than a first round value, I'm okay if that guy goes to 0. Like if Kyron goes to 0 this year, it's gonna hurt your team significantly if like a 4th round startup pick just dies. But if Cooper Kupp dies, like it's an early to mid second. Like people throw those things away all the time. So yeah, I think he's a good bet at cost for sure. And then I don't really give a shit about these tight ends. The only thing I thought was kind of funny when I was doing the research is Hate Crime Higbee, Tyler Higbee was he was just not on the Adiko's Dynasty Lab ADP goes 25 rounds, and he was just not on it. I had to Google. He's still on the roster, but they did give Colby Parkinson like a decent contract. Who's Parkinson's mostly a blocking tight end that came from Seattle. So
Higbee tore his ACL end of last year, right? So maybe that's playing into that. But yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to say about these tight ends. Let's just move on to the next team.
Yep, fair. All right, so let's finish it out with the San Francisco 49ers. Brock Purdy was kind of a weekly topic of debate last year for this show. Brian pushed back against me when I became a little bit Purdy pilled like mid-season, and I said that Brock Purdy's worth 2 first-round picks. And I don't know if I've ever seen Brian more offended at player evaluation, but he's getting to about that 2 first. Like he's back-to-back with Trevor Lawrence and ADP. I think he's fairly valued here. He's like with Trevor Lawrence and Dak Prescott, basically. What's your take on Purdy?
He's just like I think my not being able to figure out what to say about him is kind of like the epitome of Brock Purdy. Like, yeah, he's been scoring a lot of points. He was hyper efficient. Is he going to be able to keep doing that
in this offense?
Probably. But for how long? I think here would be my take on Brock Purdy. I think the efficiency. Let's remove this season in particular from the equation.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's going to be really efficient again this year. But moving forward, because QBs, we're looking at this like down the road as well. This isn't just like a 1 or 2 year proposition with a quarterback. Brock Purdy, I think ultimately the volume is going to increase as the weapons become less. I think that they will eventually, like slowly, like in 2025, maybe they can't run the ball quite as well. Like Trent Williams is getting older. They're going to probably lose either Ayuk or Debo for the 2025 season. Things will become a little bit less efficient, which probably means they need to throw a little bit more. Also, the defense is probably going to get a little bit worse over the next couple of years. So like maybe they have to throw because they're in more of a shootout type of game. And I think that Purdy within this offense is very capable of doing those things. There's just not a lot of volume. So like right now, if the efficiency goes down with the volume, things could crater. But I think that if in the long term, I don't think the efficiency is going to go down that much. It may go down a little bit. In the long term, if efficiency goes down, I think the volume will go up because he'll be trusted more. He'll be in year 3, 4, 5s at that point. And so I think that he can maintain and be really good. The problem is that I would just much rather have like Drake May. I'd much rather have, you mentioned Trevor Lawrence. I'd much rather have Trevor Lawrence because I see a world where those guys maybe get into the back end of the first because of the rushing. Whereas I don't see that with Purdy. I think he can probably just maintain at this like QB 12 to QB 16 range, which is fine, is good. But I'm really in Dynasty trying to hit a home run, and I'm trying to get guys that turn into like a first round startup caliber player, a second round startup caliber player. And I just don't really see that with Purdy, given that he's not going to rush at all. He's just very capped. He's like Jared Goff in a even better offense.
I mean, he can move a little bit. Like he's not like a statue. Like he doesn't run a ton, but like at one of the playoff games, I want to say he ran for 60 yards. Like I don't know if it was against Green Bay or Kansas City or who, but yeah, no, I wouldn't expect a lot of rushing production at all. I would expect a minimal amount, almost like the same as Jordan Love. Like they don't run a lot, but they can a little bit, I think. With Purdy, I see what you're saying. I don't know that there's ever going to be a first round startup value on him, but I don't think his ADP is done rising yet. Like you said, you expect the offense to be very good this year. It should be a top 5 offense. I think everybody expects that. I think his efficiency is going to be kind of off the charts again. And over the next 12 months, I think that'll cause his ADP to rise. He just needs to be good, really good again this year, and then he's going to get the fucking bag. They have to pay him if he's good this year, and they're going to. They're already talking about it, and I think once he secures that bag, if he gets like 4 years, 200 million, like 120 guaranteed, whatever the market is, the Trevor Lawrence deal, then he's got the job. Then he's locked in with Kyle Shanahan and whatever other offensive pieces they have. I don't think they're going to let that go barren by taking Ricky Pearsall in the first round. They already have plans on restocking it. And, just like anything else in life, there's like a lot of power to, okay, I've done this before. Now I know I can do it again. And like, kind of like you were talking about, I think Purdy is just going to play himself into being a very good quarterback. I think he's already kind of started. He was better last year than the year before that. I would expect
even really cross my mind with him about not getting a long-term deal. Like maybe that's baked into the price some. And yeah, you're probably right. Once he gets that long-term deal, we'll just arbitrarily move him up in ADP. It may not even move him up QB wise. It may just move up all of the quarterbacks a little bit as he's getting that deal. But I mean, like it didn't really move Lawrence up that much, did it? So and also I can't believe I have to do this, but you just knocked Jordan Love for running the ball. I'm going to have to back up Jordan Love, who ran for 100 more yards than Brock Purdy and doubled Brock Purdy's rushing touchdowns. So let's pump the brakes on the Jordan Love hate here. Like this is a Jordan Love pro.
So what was that, like 200 yards to 100? I didn't look up their rushing.
250 to 1. It was like 250 to 150, and then 4 rushing touchdowns to 2.
So
I think Jordan Love has some in the tank.
150 and 2 on the ground. That's like something, right? That's not like Jared Goff, Matt Stafford levels of like they're just not going to run the ball. But yeah, you're not expecting a lot from it over the course of the season. It's like 1-2 points a game at the very most. All right, man. We'll get to my boy here. This is my ride or die since last year. I don't give a shit about age. I cannot emphasize enough how much I don't care about Christian McCaffrey's age. This guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the best football players to ever play the game. I don't know if you want to say he's in his prime. He was as good last year as he's ever been. He's gonna continue that. I think this is the absolute perfect marriage of coach, player, and offensive system. Yes, he has an injury history. No, I don't care about that. I'm going to ride him until the wheels fall off. I think he's got another 2 or 3 years as the best overall player in fantasy type ceiling. And maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's done this year after another ACL injury. That's the risk you're taking with rostering him. And if that risk wasn't present, he would be a first-round startup pick. So that's kind of already a little baked into his price. But I also understand people that would prefer Bijan, Brees, or even Jahmyr Gibbs. I understand that because of the age. Kind of like we were mentioned a little bit with our previous podcast, our friend Paul Patterson, his tweet about you don't want to roster CMC or Tyreek unless you're absolutely favored to win the title this year. I don't look at it like that. If I have a strong team that I'm very confident is going to be in the playoffs and compete for a bye week, I want Christian McCaffrey on my team. I'm willing to pay up at this price to get him because I think he's a legit difference maker week to week and in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think his ADP is outrageous as like the 16th player off the board. I think that's out of control to be taking him over like Herbert and Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
So let's start there. I think it's also kind of out of control to be taking over like Puka and Garrett Wilson. With that said, on the trade market, you don't have to pay those prices. Those prices are not like where he's being valued at. Like I'm looking at fantasycalc.com right now, looking at their trade database, and I'm just going to kind of rattle off some of the trades that have been made. And I'm looking at trades that were like 2 to 4 players involved. And here's some of the deals. Obviously, the picks, we don't really know where they're going to be. Like maybe this is like we'll just assume like mid first for this exercise. But like Jalen Warren and 2 25 firsts, Tank Dell and a 25 first, a 25 first, Chris Godwin and Josh Palmer, CMC for Wicks, Brian Thomas and a 26 first. The next one is Devontae Smith, Zach Moss and DeAndre Swift. The next one's Aaron Jones and a 25 first. Like all of these trades, give me
better
CMC.
Be the 101, man.
Yeah, like give me CMC in all of these trades. So I just don't think that you have to trade away the value of where he's going in a startup. And also, I think probably this is a little bit unrealistic startup position where you would see in maybe a more seasoned league. I've seen people post on Twitter some leagues where CMC's like gone in the top 5, and like that's just not happening very often. I think more often than not, he's probably going towards the back of the second.
Yeah, the one thing that surprised me, I think he just, and they're back to back in ADP, but he must have just leapfrogged Breece Hall in the last few days. Cause I swear I was looking at this website like a week ago and CMC was RB3 right behind Breece Hall. But they're back to back. It's hard for me to justify the ADP, but like, I also don't really think it's outrageous. Like, there's no other player in fantasy that has the impact CMC has. He scores more than Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. That's it. I mean, he's the best player in fantasy. Even all the elite quarterbacks, tight ends, wide receivers, he's the best. He's better than all of them. For 1 year, he's better than all of them. And that's been the case the last 2 years. And I think it's going to be the case for a third year in a row. And he hasn't showed any signs of slowing down. So, like, yeah, I understand it seems a little ridiculous to take him over someone like Garrett Wilson, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Puka. But, like, I would rather have him than those 4 guys if I have a no-doubter contender. So
my issue just continues to be the fact that when you look at the data on how much you end up winning matchups by and how much you lose your matchups by in the playoffs, it's like 20 plus points per game. It's something like outrageous. And it just ends up probably not mattering whether you had like Christian McCaffrey or like Breece Hall. And so that's my like uncomfortableness of having the Christian McCaffrey over those guys. But like, obviously I'm not like, I'm going to take like CMC. Like it just happens to be after them. That's my issue with guys like him and Tyreek Hill is like, you've got maybe a couple years left. I think Christian McCaffrey probably has like 3-4 years left, but he's probably not going to be like Christian McCaffrey level production for more than like a couple. In your one particular league, it's just going to be pretty rare that it's going to really make much of a difference. And so that's my concern about holding Christian McCaffrey, holding Tyreek Hill. Like I've got Christian McCaffrey. I don't feel comfortable trading him. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not out there like trying to pawn him off. But if I could pivot from Christian McCaffrey to Breece Hall or Bijan, I would do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, obviously having him on your team is fun because you're gonna like you're gonna have weeks where it's just you're just crushing teams.
Yeah, definitely. Like to me, it's almost like that meme of like the low IQ guy and the high IQ guy, and then the middle IQs are all like, all these reasons to fade CMC, and the dumb guy and smart guy are like, he scores a lot of fucking points, man. So like, but yeah, no, I especially get it with Brees, man, because Brees 2 years removed from the ACL. Like, I think he's a much more complete back than Jahmyr Gibbs. He's the guy that you can kind of see along with Bijan being like almost the next CMC. All right, so with these receivers, man, Ayuk, Debo, and then Pearsall. Any kind of thoughts on them? I think they're all appropriately valued, more or less.
Yeah, I think they're all appropriately valued. Ayuk's in a tier that I'm kind of trying to pivot off. Like I'd like to try to maybe move up from Ayuk and into like AJ Brown or something. If I could do a plus, maybe I can add like a second and maybe I have to add 2 seconds or something.
Yeah, because he's like close to the top of that glob.
Yeah, and I had some Ayuk, but I traded one for McBride, like I mentioned. I traded another one away at some point this offseason. So I like Ayuk. I got a lot of him when he was in like wide receiver 25 to 30 range.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of like, you know what, this is probably closer to the peak. And so I'm probably ready to move on. But if I've got him, I'm not moving him back into the glob and adding like a second. I'd like to try to move up or move into a tight end like McBride, maybe even like a Bowers or something. And Debo is the one that I get excited about.
You do? Okay, because Debo's my guy, and I wasn't sure if you were going to kind of be like, again, maybe we're just going to keep using this guy for every division, but like I didn't know if you were going to be like, hey, Amari Cooper, man, if you can get like a nice little plus on top of Amari, just do that. I wasn't sure if you were looking to tear down a little bit with Debo because of his injury history and whatnot, and a little bit unorthodox production.
Yeah, with this offense, like I can just see him being a wide receiver 1 again, and he's only 28. And yeah, maybe he eventually gets traded. That would kind of suck, but
that would be devastating.
He's
for his
value.
If Debo gets traded, yeah, that's going to be a little bit uncomfortable and unfortunate because part of his value,
it would be devastating for his value, I think.
Yeah, I mean, part of his value is just being part of the Shanahan offense. So,
yeah,
I don't think he'll get traded this year, but it could be next offseason that he gets moved. So, I really just like Debo at his value. I've taken him in the 6th round at one point this offseason. And I think somebody offered me a first for him, and I just declined it as a contender in one league. So, I mean, I think he can be a real needle mover for your contender, and you don't have to pay like the Tyreek Hill price.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. I mean, I fucking love Debo as a player. He's one of my favorite players in the league to watch. And yeah, he's just a really unique guy. Can bust out on any week, have 5 touches for 35 fantasy points. Ricky Pearsall, I don't have a strong take on Ricky Pearsall. He's fine. I would like him a lot less if he was not in this offense, but draft capital and landing spot, it's a fair price at wide receiver 42, I think.
Yeah, wide receiver 42. Like in rookie drafts, he was a guy that I was kind of targeting like the 206, 207 range. And I think I ended up getting like 1 or 2 out of my 14 leagues. I didn't have a ton of 2nd round picks, but the ones that I did, like I was preferring him over Xavier Legette and Adonai Mitchell, which they were all kind of going there together.
Yeah.
I prefer him over Keon Coleman, who's wide receiver 35. So okay. I think what is ultimately going to happen is, I mean, I think this is pretty obvious. I'm not like breaking news or anything, but what will happen is Ayuk or Debo get moved, and then all of a sudden, wow, Pearsall is up to like wide receiver 30 overnight. And so,
but we don't expect that to happen this year.
No, I don't. Right? I don't think it'll happen this year. I think it'll be next offseason.
That's why under offseason losses I put in parentheses yet, because you never really know. But if they were going to trade Ayuk, it would have happened in March, I think.
Yeah, so they could have a draft pick for the 24 class.
And like we talked about before, like Pearsall having like almost a redshirt year, I think the market is going to heavily bake that into his price. The only thing that could, and I think I said this on one of our previous pods, the only thing that could like lower his value, I think, is like the day 3 rookie, Jacob Cowing or whatever. If he starts producing over Pearsall, then you're going to see his value crater. But like if Pearsall seems to be third in line and he's just not getting a lot of looks, I think he's going to maintain that wide receiver 40-ish value. And then, like you said, it'll go up if one of them moves. And then, man, it sucks we don't have Brian on the pod, man. George Kittle, he's been riding with George Kittle day one, kind of converted me last year a little bit. I was more of a Kittle skeptic. When we started this podcast a year ago, I had 0 George Kittle shares. Now I have 3, so like 13% exposure to him. And yeah, no signs of slowing down. He had like one of his best yards per route run of his career last year. He just doesn't need the ball that often, doesn't get the ball that often because he's a great blocker. But we talk about Ayuk or Debo getting moved. Man, wheels up for George Kittle if that's the case. And you're basically buying him at his floor right now. He's one of my favorite values in Dynasty right now.
Yeah, I think he's probably got 2 or 3 more really good seasons left on the tires. And tight end 10, he's going after Jake Ferguson, which doesn't make much sense to me. It's just an age thing, I guess, there. Like he's basically in the same tier as like Evan Ingram and Njoku. And like he and Evan Ingram are basically the same age. I think Kittle's like a half year older. But like I see Kittle as being like very likely to have another top 5 season, and he just scores a lot of points. So
Yep.
Like if you've got a team where you've invested heavily in maybe like a Bijan or Brees or CMC at running back, and you've got like top end guys at other positions, and then you land on Kittle at your tight end spot, like that's just I like that. Like obviously a lot of my teams I've mentioned, I like to have a top end tight end, but I've got a couple where it's Kittle, and I feel very good about going into the year with Kittle because unlike Ingram and Njoku, I see him getting a top 5 year, whereas in Ingram and Njoku are more type of guys where I'm just like staying afloat at the position and trying not to lose too much to the field. Because even though like I think they're good, at the end of the day, they're back in tight end ones. So they're most weeks when you go into your matchup, your opponent's got like Hawkinson, or they've got Andrews, or they've got Kelsey, and you're losing a little bit to the field, and you're just like trying to not lose too much. Whereas with Kittle, I think that even though you're only investing tight end 10, you're coming away maybe picking up a couple points on the field.
Yeah, definitely. And the only other thing I'll say before we kind of wrap this up is I was not even going to list the running backs outside of Christian McCaffrey, but I did find it notable that might not even be pronouncing this guy's name right. Isaac Guerendo is valued above Elijah Mitchell, and I don't really see any reason why that's the case. I think Elijah Mitchell, he does have an injury history, which especially as a handcuff, you don't really love to see. But I think Elijah Mitchell, my take that I was going to say earlier, and I know you traded him away, I think he's one of the best, like most cost-effective or cost-efficient, however you want to say it, best value handcuffs in Dynasty right now. Like I think he is the handcuff. I think we should treat him as a handcuff, and I don't understand why he's RB 67 and not like RB 55 or RB 50.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, like, if you said RB 50, that's like Ray Davis, Bucky Irving, Chupa.
Yeah. I'm not going crazy.
I think he falls in line with those guys pretty well.
Like
he's going after Will
Guerendo's
Shipley
like
right now.
Yeah, and I know Guerendo's like a size speed freak, especially from the combine, but like he like split time at Louisville with like whoever it was. I don't know that much about the guy, but like we've seen Elijah Mitchell come in and be productive for like multi-week stretches in the NFL. That's what you want to see as a handcuff. So that was my only thing on Elijah Mitchell, but other than that, I think we kind of covered San Francisco. Got through some fortunate Wi-Fi breaks, but we made it through.
Yeah. All right. So thanks for running Dynasty Market Watch presented by Bulletproof Family, a podcast. We're going to go do the NFC North for the Friday podcast for Matt. Like I know he wants to talk about the Packers. We're going to give that to him. So Friday, We will go NFC North and run through that group. You can find Matt on Twitter at Dynasty Peasant. I am Todd at Dynasty SFlex. Thanks for joining.